Today for Parshas Chayei Sara we have a pilpul. Vayamos Avraham b'seiva toiva. Avraham Avinu died in a good old age. Following pasuk says, Vayikberu so Yitzchak v'Yishmael, and Yitzchak and Yishmael, his sons, buried him. Says Rashi, Yitzchak and Yishmael, Yitzchak comes before Yishmael in the pasuk. From here, we may deduce, says Rashi, that Yishmael did tshuva, and he let Yitzchak go before him, and that is the meaning of good old age. So now we tell a story. Rabbi Yonatan Eibshitz, the greatest in a generation, a few hundred years ago, the author of the Urim and Sumim, Kreisi, Plesi, and more, was known as a genius when he was a very young age. And Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak Shapiro heard about him and wanted to see who this guy is, to see if he is worthy to perhaps become his son-in-law, to marry his daughter. So in the year Taf Ayin, long time ago, he met with Rabbi Yonatan. And he said, I want you to marry my daughter, but I want to test you first to see if you're fit. Chazal say, one is not allowed to marry his daughter to an Am Haaretz, to an ignoramus. So I want to hear something from you. Say Advar Torah, but I don't want to discuss regular sugyos that everybody knows. Let's do this. We'll open up a sefer, any sefer. And if you can have a novel thought, a new interesting idea, a chiddush, wherever we open up, you are the right one for my daughter. Rabbi Yonatan agreed. In the house that they stayed in, there were no Sfarim. They only found this old Siddur. So Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak Shapiro said, a Siddur is also part of the Jewish library. Let's open up the Siddur. You open up the Siddur and they see, Braisa de Rabbi Shmuel. We say it in davening, at the end of the Korbanos every morning. The Drasha of Rabbi Shmuel on the 13 principles that you can learn Torah with. So Moshe Yitzchak Shapiro asks Rabbi Yonatan, can you say some kind of a chiddush perhaps in this paisa? Rabbi Yonatan thinks, and then he says, Rabbi Shmuel says, B'yud gimel midos ha-Torah nidreshes bahen. 13 principles is what you can learn the Torah with. Among these principles are klal uprat. Prat uklal. But here at the beginning of the brisa, we must ask 3 questions. First of all, how did they call Yishmael Yishmael? A regular person doesn't get this name. How much more so a Tana? What's wrong with this name? Yishmael was a Rasha. And Chazal tell us in Yuma Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, Shem Reshaim Yirkav, we don't call people with name of Reshaim. So how come Rabbi Yishmael was called Yishmael? Question number 2 asks Rabbi Yonatan. There's a big rule. There's a rule in Shas. When there's a dispute between 2 Tanaim, so we say, Reb someone says, and Reb someone says. But when one says a halacha and there's no one disputes, it says the opposite. It says, instead of saying, Rebbe someone says, it says, Amar Rebbe Ploni. Amar Rebbe. Not Rebbe Omer. And here, by Rabbi Shmuel, he says something, we don't hear anybody arguing with him, yet it says Rabbi Shmuel Omer. It should have said, Amar Rabbi Yishmael. And I have a third question, says Rabbi Yonatan. Among the 13 principles is also the midah of klal uprat. In other words, when the rule, the klal, the general, comes before the prat, the detail, en bachlal ela mashe baprat. And there's also the midah of prat uklal, that if the detail comes before the klal, it comes out that the klal adds to the detail and includes everything. Lichoira, says Rabbi Yonatan, according to the Mandeyama, according to the opinion that en mugdem u'meuchar b'Torah, the Torah doesn't necessarily go according to chronological order. How can you know if it's klal uprat or prat uklal? These mitos don't work. And he continued and said, similar to the previous question that we asked, we can ask, and what Chazal proved, that Yishmael repented, he did shuvah from the fact that it says, Vayikberu oiso Yitzchak v'Yishmael. Yitzchak and Yishmael buried Avraham. The pasuk states Yitzchak before Yishmael to teach you that Yishmael did shuvah and he respected, honored Yitzchak. He let him go before him. This is fine according to the one who says across the board, across the Torah, there is mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. The Torah doesn't necessarily have to go according to chronological order, but according to the one who says it does, and mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. How do you know that Yishmael did shuvah? Said the Rabbi Yonatan, all these questions will be answered as one. This is what the Brisa means. Rabbi Yishmael, the fact that a Tana was called Yishmael, this Oimer, this comes to teach us that the Torah can be darshan by klal uprat, because since you see a Jew with the name of Yishmael, you must say that Yishmael did tshuva. Otherwise, nobody would name their sons Yishmael. Now you're allowed to call people Yishmael because he did tshuva. And what's the proof? The fact that the pasuk states Yitzchak before Yishmael to teach you that Yishmael in fact did tshuva and honored, respected Yitzchak. And if that's the case, we must say that in one inyan at least there is mugdam u'meucha b'Torah. Torah doesn't go according to chronological order, because otherwise you don't have a proof that Yishmael did tshuva. And after we accomplished this, and after we concluded that there is mugda u'meucha b'Torah, at least in one area, we can darshan the Torah with the midah of klal u'prat and prat u'klal. Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak Shapira heard this unbelievable chiddush. He was so impressed, he gave him a kiss on his forehead and he said, Ashrei Hoav sheben kazeh yatsa mechalatzov. Praiseworthy is the father who has this son. And obviously, the shidduch was made